I grew up obese. I grew up, dealing with my weight since I was a child. I was always an overeater and struggled with that aspect of my life. And I just realized, like, man, I don't have to just accept what I'm doing right now. There are resources out there for me to change my life.
Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. This is the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we explore ways to build resilience, build confidence, and make our minds work in our favor. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help us intentionally create a rock-solid mindset upon which a vibrant life experience can be built. My name is April Seifert. I'm a psychologist, a life design strategist, and co-founder of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength. Each week, I'll introduce you to an expert, a concept, a technique, or a hands-on practice that will help you build psychological strength in your own life. These are the tools to help you thrive. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I'm your host. And this week, we are diving into a very specific topic. And that topic is obesity and bariatric surgery. Now, here's the thing. If this topic directly relates to you, you are going to get an incredible amount of value out of this episode because we are speaking to an amazing woman named Kayla Landaeta, and she is an expert in the area of bariatric surgery and all that comes with it, including and especially the psychological and life design aspects that go hand in hand with having a successful journey through the bariatric surgery process. I also want to speak directly before this episode starts to folks who this may not apply directly to. You may not be struggling to the degree that Kayla speaks about with your weight. Maybe you're more of the person who is worried about 10 or 20 pounds. You're not talking about a life-threatening level of obesity. I still encourage you to listen to this episode for two reasons. Number one, as someone who may not be able to directly relate to the experience of somebody who might be more than 300 pounds, more than 400 pounds. As someone who might not be able to relate directly to that, this episode and this conversation with Kayla will give you a much more intimate and nuanced understanding of the situation that other people might be in. And I think it gives you the ability to be so much more empathetic and compassionate to other people who might be struggling in a way that you can't directly relate to. So number one, please listen to this episode for that reason. But secondly, there's something in this episode for you. There's so many topics that we touch on in this conversation. We touch on self-awareness and how important it can be to be self-aware as you're going through a difficult or big transition. We talk about radical responsibility. Holy cow, do we get into a great conversation about that and about not being a victim to your circumstances, about deciding that life can be bigger and better than it is now, and deciding that you're the type of person who deserves that. We talk about the identity shift that happens when you go through a major change in life, whatever that might be. And so many more topics that relate to psychological strength. So yes, this episode is very focused on something that is very specific, like bariatric surgery and obesity, but the topics that we touch on are ones that impact us all. So I feel like this episode is one that can be such a compassionate connection point between just people at a human level who are just struggling to be the best version of themselves that they can be and trying to fit in a world where a lot of things that we deal with just aren't talked about. Kayla is an absolute light in this episode. She shares so authentically about her own journey through bariatric surgery, the fact that she was 343 pounds in college, and she had to come to the realization that there were resources that could help her, even though she could remember failing every diet that she ever tried, and the psychological burden that puts on a person. She talks about how in the work that she does today, she works directly with people who are going through the bariatric process. Some people are pre-op, they're thinking about it or working up to get to the point where they can have their surgery, things like insurance forms and other hoops that you have to jump through in order to be able to qualify. And then other people who are post-op and they're dealing with what it means to be a person who doesn't diet to lose weight anymore, rather a person who is eating for a lifestyle to maintain their weight. There's so much nuance and heart and compassion in this episode with Kayla, and I absolutely cannot wait for you all to meet her. Before we dive into the episode, I want to highlight one thing. Within the Peak Mind Center, we have an absolutely free product called the Peak Mind Starter Pack. You can access that product. Just go to www.peakmindpsychology.com and you can get access to that product. The reason why I'm bringing that up at the outset here is because there's a module in it right now. I can't guarantee it's going to be in there forever. So if you're listening to this episode well into the future, I hope it's still there. If it's not, shoot me a message. We might be able to figure something out. But right now, in that module, or in that starter pack, there's a module called the Self-Identity Diagnostic. So much about what we talk about with Kayla today deals with self-identity. I'm the type of person who. I'm the type of person who is worth. I'm the type of person who can or can't. People like me can or can't. So much is wrapped up in our identity that causes us to have sets of beliefs that can either, cause us to go after massive goals that are amazing and so thrilling and motivating, or can limit us and lead us to not even try in particular domains. And I would encourage you, if any of this resonates with you, head over to peakmindpsychology.com, get access to the starter pack, take that module. You talk about self-awareness. That's a big dose of it. All right, I have highlighted enough. I'm so excited for you guys to meet Kayla. She is a wonderful, wonderful person. Please enjoy this episode. Take away as much compassion and love as you can, and go be brave. All right, here's Kayla. Kayla, I'm so excited you're here. I have been looking forward to this episode for, I think, about 2 months now. So this is exciting that this day is finally here.
I'm so excited after having to reschedule. It's finally time, and I've missed talking to you, so it's going to be great.
Yay! For folks who are listening to this, I actually met this week's guest at Modern Well, a co-working facility that she and I both work out of, and I've gotten to know Kayla's expertise and the work that she does and have been so impressed with both her knowledge and the care and compassion that she puts into her work that I had to ask her to come on and share that all with all of you, because it's just such a light in the world. So welcome and thank you. And I'm so excited.
Thank you. It was so nice of you.
So let's start with just sort of the basics. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a bit about the work that you're doing and how you got into it.
Yeah, so my name is Kayla Landaeta. Like April said, I work out of Modern Well now once I started my own company. And basically what I do is I am a weight loss surgery life coach. So almost 4 years ago now, I had weight loss surgery. I started at 343 pounds after I graduated college, and through lots of ups and downs, I decided that I could not be the person that regretted my life choice about not getting a handle on my health. And so I had weight loss surgery. And after a year and a half, I was sitting down at about 180 pounds. I was working for a fitness center. I was slowly growing an Instagram base of thousands of people who were interested in seeing me post pictures of my changing body and the food I was eating. And suddenly I realized more and more people wanted advice from me and wanted to know more about the experience and open up about obesity. And so slowly I overcame my fears and I started my own company, Time to Deflate LLC, as a life coaching business to work directly with bariatric patients in their pre-op and post-op process. Obesity was always something that was so incredibly isolating for me that I thought nobody else would understand at all what I was dealing with. And so being able to find thousands of people around the world who we could share these same experiences and understand each other, it was super powerful. So that's what I do work-wise. Otherwise, I am just about to celebrate my 1-year anniversary with my husband. He and I have been dating since 8th grade. So he has been there through the thick and thin of it. I'm an avid beer lover. I love a good glass of wine at Modern Well for one of their parties. And just a general lover of life. My life has been renewed a lot since I have lost my weight and retaken my life. And you will always see me out being active and trying new things now, which is very exciting.
I love it. I love it so much. So it's always fun to talk to somebody who has a situation like yours where they've got expertise in an area for sure, but they've also walked the walk. They've also been in the situation that they work in, and they understand not only the sort of science and the stuff that you can get out of a textbook, but they understand the complexities of the emotion and the personal experience that happens when you're moving through something like bariatric surgery. So I love talking to people like you. I'm wondering if we can start sort of before, because you mentioned the word isolation, and that just makes my heart sink, because that's one of the, there's a reason why, when people are in prison, putting them in solitary confinement is such a terrible punishment for people, because isolation and feeling cut off from other people is psychologically so damaging to us. And you used that word and it just hit me in the heart so hard. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what it was like before. I mean, and even before you had decided to make the decision, because, that's kind of its own situation.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up obese. I grew up, dealing with my weight since I was a child. I was always an overeater and struggled with that aspect of my life. It started off as a very typical story. My parents were also overweight and dealing with that. And so every time they went on a diet, I was expected to diet with them too. I had to go to Curves for Women at the age of 12 because my mom was worried about me. And there was just more and more things like that where I wasn't a typical kid. I was forced to do sports because my mom was worried about my weight. And there's just a lot of stuff like that where it wasn't stuff I wanted to do. And so I felt like I didn't belong with my peers for being in those same exact situations, but obviously for very different reasons. And then as I got older, I was always a very social kid. I always had friends. I started dating my boyfriend in 8th grade and he was around for everything. But none of my friends struggled with their weight. And I think it leads, especially as a child, you don't understand why you are so different or what's broken about you is how you visualize it. Because here are my friends who can eat anything they want, who are just running around full of energy, who are tiny and beautiful. And then you're just sitting there thinking God, what am I doing wrong? Now, little do you know, as you get older, you're thinking oh, well, here they were in these highly athletic sports and they were, had families cooking a certain way. And there's lots of other reasons. And genetically, they're just different. But when you're a kid and you feel like you can't talk about it and you feel like you can't relate to them in the slightest because they would never understand, you just slowly and slowly close in. And I think the biggest thing that it really caused for me growing up was the lying. I felt like I lied all the time to my friends because I always had to come up with an excuse for why I couldn't do something or why I wanted to sit on the sidelines, why I was tired. I remember in middle school and high school, I lied about having my period all the time so I didn't have to go to gym class because I was so embarrassed. And that definitely caused an issue with just pushing myself further and further into isolation, because obviously lying, you kind of tie yourself up in your own web, even if they're these tiny white lies. And it creates a new personality that you never expected for yourself. And I know as I got bigger, especially through college, a lot of hobbies that I really liked growing up, I loved going for walks, I loved biking. As I kept gaining weight and those things got more and more uncomfortable for me, and really I didn't want to do them anymore, I became the kid who said, oh, I hate biking. And now that I'm at a healthy weight, I do 40-mile bike rides with my husband. I love biking. It's one of my favorite things to do. But slowly these lies, they became part of my personality, and it really limited where I saw my life ever going. All contributed to how my personality shifted with my weight as I kept growing.
It's a look into the experience of a person that, as you mentioned, we don't talk about. People don't talk about. And in most cases, you can't ask about. So before we go anywhere, I just have to acknowledge you and the fact that you are so willing to be open about the experience that you're having, because no matter who's listening to this, if it's a person who is struggling in the same way, or maybe thinking about bariatric surgery or whatever, just struggling with their weight, it's someone who is echoing maybe part of what you might be feeling, and that's validating. That someone out there understands me and sees me for the experience that I'm having. And if you're not that person, if you're someone who hasn't been in that experience or doesn't firsthand know, it gives you more compassion and understanding for what it might be like to be in someone else's shoes. Because what I've seen just, in social media sort of, but more in passing in just traditional, just being out in the world, is there's a lot of assumptions that happen about, why somebody is in a particular situation. And, it's just so easy to assume about people. And so I love that you're so open about your experience and what it was actually like, because it takes those assumptions off the table and it says, no, this is what it actually was like. This is how it actually felt.
Well, it was such a powerful thing in college. Because I never talked about my weight. If my parents tried to talk to me directly about my weight growing up, it usually ended up with me crying or running away, like literally running out of the room, like, do not talk to me. The fastest I ever ran growing up was when they wanted to talk to me about my weight, as I like to joke. But then my now husband growing up, it wasn't until college that we really realized, like, we were living together. We realized we wanted to be together. And it was the first time he had me alone in the car driving somewhere that he brought it up to me, because he knew I couldn't run away. And he came at it with such compassion. Like, he's amazing. He always loved me. He always made me feel so good. But he just said, he was like, I want you around. He was like, I don't want to, be this invested in you and love you. And he was like, you're killing yourself the way you're treating your body. And he's like, that's not a great position for me to be in with you. But really the fact is that one of my coworkers in college was the first one who, she had weight loss surgery and didn't tell anyone until she lost 100 pounds. She came out on Facebook and said, hey, I had the vertical sleeve gastrectomy. I lost 100 pounds. I'm really proud of myself. And if anyone has questions, let me know. And I had never been close to her or anything. I just knew her through work. And she was the first person in my life that I sent a Facebook direct message to her and said, hey, this is really awkward, but could I talk to you about your surgery that you had? And she was the first person that she greeted me with such compassion because she understood. She got it. And so she talked to me in a way that made me feel totally seen and understood. And it was the first time I had ever heard about someone having bariatric surgery at such a young age that I realized, oh my gosh, I could do this. This isn't something I have to wait until I'm 40, 50, 60 years old and realizing I need to change my life. And since then, the more people I talk to and being able to finally be open with my parents about what my life was like with them and having them tell me what their side of it was as a parent to an obese child, trying to figure out just how to help and how to help them manage it. It has made me realize that being vulnerable, it's icky. There are times that I'm just I don't want to talk about this. This is so weird. But the amount of good it has done for me and for everyone I've talked to it's life-changing when you really, really realize that sharing your story could cause that big of an effect on people.
That's a message that I hope every single person hears too, because it doesn't matter if you've been through some type of trauma or you're grieving something or you're struggling as a parent, or maybe it is weight related or maybe it's mental health related or whatever it is. If you can muster up the bravery to even put a bit of it out there, it does help people. I remember quite a while ago, I put out an episode of the podcast where I talked about my postpartum experience with postpartum anxiety. And it was not easy because it's something that still to this day, there are ripple effects of that affect my life on, I wouldn't say a daily basis, but a weekly basis for sure. And it was hard to put it out there, but the number of direct messages and people who have reached out, not only just to say thanks, that was validating, but people who then found themselves in that situation and felt like they could reach out and say, basically ask for permission to go get help because I feel horrid right now. This is bad enough, right? Like this counts, right? Sometimes you just need someone, and I can imagine you've got people reaching out to you in this situation who are almost looking for someone to just say, I see you, and this counts. Like, this is it. You're the type of person who can consider something like this because you're the type of person who deserves to have the rest of your life be different than it has been so far, even if that transition might be scary. And even if there's a lot that's going to be wrapped up in that, you are the type of person who gets to flirt with the idea that what happens from here might be different than what got you here.
Yeah. Oh, those are my favorite conversations because at first, like they used to bug me when people would reach out to me, and like, it was obvious they were asking for permission. That, do you think I could go to the doctor and do this and stuff? And it's like, yes, of course, it's your life. Go, like, just do it. And then I realized the more and more I talk to people that I'm just like, yeah, the first time my friend, that I talked to her and she made me feel so incredibly seen and so validated, how big of a difference it was. And now those conversations, now because it's been so long, I have people messaging me like, I'm officially your post-op today and I did so good. And like, this is your email you sent me 3 years ago. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it's mind blowing because it really does affect people where they really felt like, okay, yeah, this is something I could do to control my life again. And it's so cool. I love my job.
That's huge. It's huge. And there's a lot wrapped up in, I'd love to talk a little bit about making that decision because I think if we rewind and we think about you as a child, right? When you're a kid, there's a lot that you don't understand, right? You don't know, and you don't have control over the food that's in your house or the lifestyle of the environment that's around you. So much of that is dictated by other people. So when you're a very young child, there's really no maybe understanding and no control there. I guess that shifts slowly and gradually as you get older. When was it for you the point at which you started to realize like the factors that contributed to your weight gain? Like when did you start to get sort of the knowledge and then start to realize that there might be something that you could do?
So I want to say that like the knowledge aspect, I feel like I started learning in like, the 5th to 8th grade mark, like middle school, where you are learning about nutrition, you are learning about physical exercise, and you slowly realize like, oh, well, the foods that I'm eating and the portion sizes I'm eating, like that doesn't apparently make sense, but that's what makes me feel good. And that's what, and as a child, you're not logical, you're emotional. And like, you're going to go with those emotional impulses because like, why would I care about logic? And so I felt like information wise, it was there, but nobody explained to me why it would matter in the long term. Like I always think about the fact that in high school, they tell you like, okay, you're going to go to college, here, sign these papers for this extravagant amount of money that you'll pay back. And you're just like, oh yeah, I totally understand what this is. And then you graduate college and you're like, who let me do that? Without explaining this to me.
Do you know like, I was 18 and this is a lot of money you gave me.
Like you wouldn't let me drink a beer and you let me take out how much money? Where logically I was given the information, but that doesn't mean I was in a position that I had control and I understood emotionally what that meant. So high school was the first time that I think I was really introduced to diet culture when it wasn't my parents. Like my parents all throughout middle school and stuff, they were trying to help me figure out my weight. I remember my dad telling me like, don't worry about it. Like it's when puberty hits, it'll start melting off. You're going to lose your baby fat. I heard all the things growing up where I was just like, oh, it'll be taken care of for me. It'll happen. Like, don't worry about it. It'll just work out. And then high school was the first time that I started seeing people actively trying to change their weight, where I saw friends who used to be chubbier slim down drastically over one summer and come back with a totally new body, or girls talking about dieting or not eating and learning about eating disorders, and then having friends wanting to have an eating disorder and all that like super conflicting, awful high school information. And yet I still feel like most of it was very ruled by emotion for me, where I was like, yeah, but food is good. Food is comforting. It's the one thing I can control. And I would rather feel good in my life. And so it really wasn't until after college that I really started to realize I could control other things in my life and I didn't have to accept my situation, whether that's where I lived financially. Like it was the first time of like true freedom after college where it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm not expected to go to high school and then college and then this and this, this. Like now it's just this open abyss of what do I do now? And no one was telling me what to do. And it was very empowering and overwhelming. And I just realized like, man, I don't have to just accept what I'm doing right now. There are resources out there for me to change my life. And that's when I really started to understand okay, I can do this. This isn't my environment telling me what to do. I could change my environment.
That's such an important point. Just folks who are tuning into this episode, if you caught Friday's episode, so the episode that came out right before this one, we dove into the concept of radical responsibility, which I define, and Kayla, I know you have definite thoughts about this as well, and I'd love to hear yours. I define as taking 100% responsibility for 100% of the situations you find yourself in. So it's not fault and blame. It's not backwards looking. It's not, did I deserve to be here, to get here? That isn't it. It's here you are, looking forward. What are you going to do? Like, what responsibility can you take? What factors can you influence? And are you going to? And are you going to take responsibility for them? And it's not easy to accept that, because in a lot of cases, it can be easier to just sort of throw up your hands and say, I don't have control over this. This is not something that, and I'm talking very broadly now, not about necessarily weight loss or anything, but very broadly. It can be easier and frankly more comfortable, not in a positive way, but in a familiar way, to stay where you are. Did you struggle with that? Like, I have to believe that there was almost like a seesaw back and forth a little bit at that decision point.
Well, and I feel like I have that, a different type of decision every day that I struggle with it. Because it's not, I always joke with clients that I work with, and I'm like, I'm not a disciple. It's not the fact that I know exactly what I'm doing. I struggle. I do all my own self practices every day. But I think, so I read a book by Seth Godin called When It's Your Turn and It's Always Your Turn. And great book. If anyone wants to read it, it's like the most motivational book I've ever read in my life. And there is a great section of the book where he talks about the fact of fear of freedom. And it was this whole concept of we're not afraid of the things that we supposedly don't have control over, because we have control over everything. It's the fact that the freedom of that choice is terrifying and we'd rather not deal with it. And the way he described it, he was like, you always have control over your choices. He was like, I can stipulate that you may say, well, if I want to keep X, Y, and Z, then I have no choice. He's like, that's totally true. Like, you are prioritizing stuff differently to cause your choices to change. But in the end, you have total choice over what's happening. And like, just reading that and just realizing how that affects every aspect of my life, whether that even means like, oh, I really want to do this 5K, but like, I'm not a runner. It's just like, well, okay, no, I could be a runner. I could, like, there's a lot of running programs out there to teach people to be a runner. All right, I guess I'll sign up for a 5K and like make it happen. And just like, I'll make that choice. And obviously, like you said, there's a lot of resources out there that change things. But I feel like once you realize that for like an important part of your life about how much choice and freedom you do have, once you accept that and see how big and different your life could be, I feel like it's easier then for all those smaller choices to be like, well, I mean, I could do that and we could just see what happens. Because if I don't do that, then I'm choosing to stay exactly where I'm at. And from what I have found, every time I've taken a radical decision, whether it was weight loss surgery, agreeing to get married, starting my own business, like there's so many things that, was it the right time for any of those things? Was it like the most opportune moment of my life to jump in and do that? No, probably not. I probably could have waited for a more opportune time if I was willing to just sit there and wait. But every time I've made a choice to just be like, no, it's time. I'm going to do it. It's never let me down. because even if it didn't work out in the long run, it led to so many other opportunities and choices and other great things to go off of.
There's so much in what you just said. Number one, people don't realize sometimes that choosing not to decide or choosing not to act is also a choice. That you, sometimes things like sunk cost, I've put so much effort into this thing that I've been doing. I can't change now. Well, yes, you can. We focus so much on effort and time and whatever that we've put into something in the past, and we don't give enough credit to what's coming in the future because that's not as tangible. But I go back to you saying, I don't have to wait until I'm 40, 50, 60 to have this surgery. If you think about it from a rational perspective, how many years of your life can you live in a more healthy way? It makes no sense at all to wait. But that's not how our minds work and not what it tells us. We have a hard time thinking about the possibility of there being positives or something coming that we can't quite wrap our hands around because we don't have experience with it yet. It's that blind faith that we have a tough time with sometimes, but it is very rational when you think about it. So that was one piece that I had to highlight because, you're saying you could have chosen to stay where you were, but you didn't. You chose something different.
Life can be so much more than simply going to work and waiting for the weekend. But deep down, you already know that. You know that life can be so much more vibrant. You know you were made for more than just passively going through the motions. You know you can thrive, but to do that, you have to start from the inside out. And that is why I'm so excited to announce that for a limited time, we're offering you the opportunity to join us in the Peak Mind membership for only $1 for your first month. That's right, $1 to join us in the full Peak Mind membership. All you have to do to take advantage of this amazing offer is to visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Think about it. We all know what we need to do to keep our bodies strong. But what about our minds? What if you had the tools to build the psychological strength, confidence, and resilience to help you thrive at work, at home, and in the rest of your life? What if you made the commitment to living your life by design and not by default? All of this is possible. The goal of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength, is to help you build the mental toughness, flexibility, and resilience to thrive in your life. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help you intentionally create the vibrant life experience you know is possible. Through live online workshops, a 24/7 on-demand library, expert interviews, and monthly challenges, our members are building the psychological strength that it takes to thrive through life's ups and downs. And like I said, you can do it too. For a limited time, we're offering you the opportunity to join us for only $1 for your first month. Just visit www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So what choice are you making? Join us in the Peak Mind membership before this amazing offer goes away.
Tell me a little bit about how you work with people. What do people reach out to you about? You've definitely mentioned permission is something. And I'm asking this because anytime we're at the or approaching the start line of something that's going to take us outside of our comfort zone, that's going to be outside of what we would say, I'm the type of person who blah, blah, blah. Anytime that we're going to try to do something that's outside of that, it can get pretty heady and there can be a lot of issues wrapped up in it. So I ask about the type of things that your clients come to you with because I think it applies more, it applies so much more broadly to anyone who's doing something that feels new and really scary.
Yeah. So the majority of my clients, I tend to work with a lot of people who are pre-op. And so for people out there who don't know much about weight loss surgery, basically to get it qualified for insurance to cover it. A lot of insurance companies won't still. They see it as an elective procedure, which I personally think is crap because of how much good it does for people. But either way, more and more insurance companies are accepting it, but you have to do a lot of work for them to agree to cover it. And so my pre-op process took me 8 months of doctor's visits, nutritionist visits, physical therapy, psycho health. I had to follow a diet plan. Like, there was a lot to it. And while it was really empowering for me and I really, really loved it, other people have to go through programs that are 6 months long where you see your doctor twice. They hand you a pamphlet and say like, okay, follow this diet. You have to lose 25 pounds and we'll talk to you in 6 months. And there's other people's programs that are like, okay, yep, it looks like your insurance will approve it in 8 weeks. So we'll schedule your surgery and we'll see you then. So what you have to do to qualify is crazy different around the world. And people start panicking before it because, well, I failed at every diet leading up to this. How am I going to succeed after this?
That's got to be a huge belief to work with people on.
Well, and think historical factor. If you think about the fact you're coming to the point of bariatric surgery, you have obviously failed at every single diet leading up to this point.
Yes. Oh.
And it's because so many programs don't provide any real assistance. A lot of programs, the doctors, the nurses, the therapists, the nutritionists aren't bariatric patients. They're people who, like you said at the very beginning of the podcast, like they understand it textbook wise and they can talk to you, but being somebody who's struggling with extreme morbidly obese, history, that's very different when you talk to somebody who's never struggled with more than 20 pounds in their life. So I have a lot of people come to me pre-op who their doctor has given them some kind of a plan and they're just like, listen, if a person could have given me a plan and I could have followed it for my life, I wouldn't be needing surgery.
Right.
Like, how do I implement this? And so what I do is I take their plan, I help them understand why that plan is in place the way it is. So we kind of break down like, what are the goals with what they just gave you? So you understand the why. I was always that person that when somebody tells me a rule, I'm like, why? What is the point of that? Like, don't tell me.
Oh, honey, you and I have that in common.
Oh,
my poor husband, he listens to me say, oh, but honey, most of those rules were made for like the lowest common denominator. They just don't apply here. Like, it just doesn't apply. It's terrible to say because yes, you do have to follow them. But you and I, yeah, we have that same little like, pushback.
My old jobs did not appreciate me because I would not be micromanaged because I was just like, tell me why you want to do this. If you can explain to me why, I will do it the best you've ever seen it. But until you can tell me the reason.
High five. I'm with you.
But so a lot of people struggle with that. And so being able to actually describe to them, like, this is the reason why they want you to work on this now. So post-op, these things are easier. And then it's a heck of a lot easier to actually agree and stick to it and implement it. And then the other thing is just taking their plans and actually creatively fitting it into your life. And so I've had a client before who's like, listen, I'm in a same-sex relationship. My child has autism and is the pickiest eater. These are the only 5 foods he eats, and I have to keep him in the house. And we need to go to fast food because that's what he eats. And like, what am I going to do while managing all of these things? Like, sure, this plan is great that my doctors gave me, but it doesn't fit with my life. And so being able to come up with creative solutions with meal prep, and here's things that you can order for your kid that won't tempt you, and here's other things we can try. And just having that extra set of eyes to be creative and knowing the end goal and understanding mentally where you are is really powerful for people, especially at the beginning where they're just like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't know if this is something I can stick with. Or it's just like being able to be there every week. Like, no, like, look, it's worth it. Like, look at the things you're going to be able to do. So that's the vast majority of my clients. And then I do work with people who are post-op. So a couple of my clients right now are immediately post-op who they just wanted somebody that when like their first month, when they're eating soft foods and protein shakes, that they can talk to somebody who's going to make them feel sane when they're going through their hormones changing and all sorts of, everything that accompanies bariatric surgery, just realizing it's normal. Because a lot of our healthcare system, they can't call their bariatric doctor to be like, is it normal? I'm sitting here crying over a commercial of French fries. I'm not even hungry. Like, there's so many weird things that pop up and you can't call your doctor to be like, is this a normal thing? And then farther post-op, dealing with regain and dealing with maintenance, which maintenance for weight is the most mind-boggling thing I think I've ever gone through in my life, because I've always been someone who's needed to lose weight. So who is my identity now that I'm farther out, don't need to lose weight?
That's huge.
Oh, there's so many levels. And it's cool because after being able to live through all these things, and I've been maintaining my weight now for 2 years, and I've dealt with, 10-pound regains and having to lose them and deal with that. And it's cool because I know each side where I'm just like, I understand what you're going through and I remember it sucking and here's how I got out of it. But yeah, there's just so many different layers, and I love it because every client, every call I get to hop on every day, it makes you very grateful and it makes you appreciate where you are in your journey. And it makes you want to work that much harder to maintain this lifestyle I've created.
Let's talk about that. What does your life look like now?
My life is awesome. I love it. So right now, I would actually consider myself an active person, which if you had told 13-year-old Kayla that she would ever be an active person, that would be a big laugh in your face. But I would consider myself a beginner runner. I'm a huge biker. I'm planning a trip to Tahoe to go summit a couple of mountains with my husband. Like, never thought that would be the case. I'm somebody so I graduated from university with a history and philosophy degree. I'm not using that in my work, but I still use that in everyday, like, critical thinking. But I thought after going out of college, I was like, well, I'll never work a job that I love. For a long time, I worked as like office administrator. I worked in a phone scheduling bank for a hospital up here. Like, I never thought I would have a career that I loved. So now I'm getting to do this dream job that I've created, that I get to have like huge emotional, like, I'm living the millennial dream is what I'm saying. I get to help people and I get paid for it. And it's just like fabulous. I get to like go for a run in the middle of the day because I'm not at work. Like, this is the millennial dream everyone's looking for.
I love that. I love that. What it sounds like, the way that you describe it, and your voice changed, which was so cool. Your voice got so much more vibrant. You talked about it before, how you're doing these 40-mile bike rides. High five, sister. I don't think I've ever ridden 40 miles. I mean, even on like the worst Peloton ride I've ever done, I'm not even approximating that. So, wow. 40-mile bike rides and trying new things. Like, I remember the first time I decided to do a 5K run or a 10K, I don't remember, one of the two. I knew that it was not possible. It wasn't that I wonder if I could do it. I was like, no, I can't. I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to sign up anyway and try it. So I hear you with that. When you're doing these new things and like climbing mountains, it sounds like you've gone through this experience and you've come out the other side and active, like an actual active participant in your own life. You're not passively moving through it anymore. It feels like you're very actively participating in every aspect of your life.
And it's amazing, like, especially being like, I guess I'm officially in my late 20s. I hate saying that. I was like, I'm in my mid 20s. I'm late. But I'm at this really fun part with my husband where, we're working on our debt-free journey to pay off all of our student loans. I have this healthy body. He has a job he loves. I have a job I'm creating. Like, it's the first time that, I talked after college with like, taking ownership over my weight, that looking out to the abyss where it's like, man, I could change things. And that was coming from I need to fix my life. I need to change things. And now I'm at this point of like, wow, I get to grow my life and change things.
Yeah.
And like, it's that same like really like scary, overwhelming, free feeling of like, wow, I could build a tiny house and go live in the mountains with my husband. I could go, live on the East Coast for like, it's this huge, wide open expanse of just like, I could do any of the, like, I could figure it out. And it's overwhelming and it's like terrifying and it's so cool. Just the idea of like, I could figure whatever I wanted to do out right now and jump on it and just go and make it work logistically.
What I love about what you said, it's the distinction that we talk about within Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength. We talk about it all the time. The difference, especially in the field of psychology, between helping people get to the point where we're sort of overcoming an acutely or chronically difficult thing, which has its merits. There is so much value, obviously, in getting people over or getting them to the point where they're managing or being able to live with more effectively a diagnosis, a mental health condition, anything like that. There's benefit there. It's a different thing, though, to take somebody from the point where they've done that and get them to thrive and like really, really hit the gas. And I love that you made that distinction, because now you're at this point where you're doing well in all box checks that you could put on a piece of paper. You're doing well, and you're like, how can I thrive? And that's so cool.
Well, and I think it's funny because my sister is actually a life coach as well. And her and I both kind of started our businesses right at the same time. And hers isn't bariatric or anything, but she loves working with mothers and spirituality and food and health. And it's so funny because growing up, she always told me she wanted to do that. She was always reading. She wanted to go to school for it. And I remember thinking like, gosh, like who needs that? And I think it's like, wow, what a different part of your life where, like you said, it's just like, I'm willing to thrive. I'm willing to grow. And I think that's where life coaching is becoming so popular. And life coaching is becoming such like a vital, crazy industry that's really exploded, where people are sitting there like, I don't want to coast anymore. I want someone to help me, embrace my life and really push it out there in a way that I never thought it could be. And so it's really fun to see my sister with what she's doing and see what I'm doing with my niche population. And yeah, it's very cool to see the thriving aspect. Because like you said, when you're in another darker spot in your life, like you're just like, I don't understand the point of that until you get out of it. And then you're like, oh, there's even more. I could do even more now.
Well, and what I feel like you're doing for people is, we talked earlier about how it can be easy to hold on, or I guess it can be safer or feel safer to hold on to the things that you know in the past. It's harder to think into the future about the benefit that you might get by going through a massive change, whatever that might be. And you are providing something a bit more tangible that people could see. They just have to be able to dare to believe that it could also happen for them. But you're being this tangible example of, hey, this transition, this change, this effort, this work you're going to do, it's worth it because this is what it looks like on the other side. And being that guide for someone is so valuable, because you're talking about somebody who like cannot see the road ahead of them unless you show it to them. And it's so valuable what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it.
I love it. So before we wrap things up today, a couple of things. I have to ask you for your definition of psychological strength. I'd love to hear that. You have such a wealth of experience, and I'd love to hear how you think about psychological strength.
So psychological strength to me really comes back to what we talked about with radical responsibility. It's that fact of really feeling confident in your own mind and your own soul that you are worth it, and you do have a lot more power than you ever thought you could have. Being able to make choices that directly affect your life, not like you're not just worried about your kids, your significant other, your friends, but actually having that responsibility for yourself and knowing that you're worth the work, I think shows the most strength and power that anybody could show for their psychological and emotional health.
That's a great definition. I got goosebumps when you said that. I love that. I love it.
Thank you.
And then given that you have so much expertise in this area, I'm wondering if you can leave us with some tangible tips. Maybe we go two sides of the coin with this. First, maybe tips for people who might be sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, that kind of sounds like me. Is this something that might apply to me? Is this something that I should consider? So tips for a person who might be in that situation. And then also tips for somebody who might never have been in that situation. How can you be more compassionate and supportive and understanding to others in your life who, might be in a position where they're, really resonating with your story?
Yeah, definitely. So if you are someone out there who is considering bariatric surgery, my number one logistical actionable step is contact your insurance company and contact your doctor. Because as much as you may want to start going onto YouTube and Instagram and finding stories and talking to me, until you know the logistics for your program, like I said, they're all so incredibly different. You need to do that first. So logistics, that's always my first thing that I tell people. Otherwise, my biggest thing for people considering surgery is really take a moment to look at your life and understand that distinction of, if I don't make a choice to at least pursue this a little bit to see what the option is, if I choose to just stay here and accept where I'm at right now, are you okay with that? And if you aren't comfortable with surgery, what changes could you make? Could you reach out to a doctor or a nutritionist instead of going and signing up for another app that you won't use? There's so many legitimate resources out there to help you manage your weight and your health that I think a lot of us find it easier just to give more money to diet culture instead. There's a lot of resources out there that really do want to see you actually succeed and not fail and come back. I also want to include, because I know we're going to talk about somebody who's never had that issue before, but if you're somebody who is dealing with a loved one who's going through this situation, so whether you're a parent, a sibling, a significant other, a child, the biggest thing you can do is lead by example for them. Whenever you try to talk to somebody dealing with a weight issue, they already feel so closed off that you coming at them will feel like an attack. So the best thing you can do, the thing that I always try to do for my friends and family who maybe are trying to figure out diet and exercise, lead by example. Invite them to go for a walk the next time you want to hang out. Invite them to have a potluck at your house instead of going out for drinks. There's so many ways that you can include a more healthful decision in their life to make them feel safe around you and yet not judged. That's the biggest thing I can recommend to somebody dealing with a loved one with a weight issue. For somebody who's never dealt with weight before and doesn't have any idea about what people are going through, the biggest thing that you have to remember is just the fact that we're all humans. There's a huge epidemic right now in our world of obesity-related discrimination in our workforces and so many other things. And know that there are so many other resources besides this perceived idea of laziness. And it might even just be that this internal belief of they don't think they can. And remember, there are so many other things in our society that we're all struggling with that at the same time, whether it's our finances or whether it's trying to become a mom or a dad. There's so many stories that you don't know. Unfortunately, weight is just something that we carry on our bodies and you can see the result. You may not see my credit card statement. You may not see my fertility issues. There's so many things we don't see, but weight, unfortunately, is right out there for you to see if someone's struggling one way or another. So just be cautious of judging that because you don't know the whole story. And know that person, they just need a friend more than anything. And they are just as great of a person and are worth investing in. Never fall into those stereotypes that other people might be putting forward.
That is beautiful. And I so appreciate that insight. I appreciate all of the expertise that you've brought to this interview. And I appreciate so much your ability to be vulnerable and your bravery in putting your own personal story out there. People listening to this, if you don't follow Kayla on Instagram, and I'll have you tell people your Instagram handle and your website in just a minute, you need to. There's a lot of people that I follow on Instagram, and there is, maybe a couple handfuls of people whose stories I watch almost on a daily basis, and yours are those because I feel like you project such a feeling of empathy and compassion for people who might be following you because they want to understand or they want a glimpse into the life of somebody who might be further along than them. And that authenticity is what people crave today, and you absolutely have it. So if you don't follow her on Instagram, you need to. Even if you don't feel like bariatric surgery is something that applies to you or that you're worried about, follow her because she is one of the few human beings who are putting themselves out there as a full human being on social media. It's amazing. So with that, help us out. Where can we follow you, learn more, get to know you a bit more?
Yeah, so my handle on literally everything is time to deflate, all spelled out. Even if you want to follow me on Pokemon Go, I'm there on Time to Deflate as well. But I am the most active on Instagram and my website, timetodeflate.com. If you're interested in coaching resources at all, if you are going down bariatric surgery path, my application to work with me is on my website. I'm not on nearly as much, but I do have a pretty active YouTube channel as well where you can find me and participate and see the content that I'm putting out there for free for everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Like I said, I had been looking forward to this for so long. This completely exceeded every expectation I had, which was pretty high before. But you're just so knowledgeable and so compassionate with the way that you approach this work. And I feel like I have a better understanding of the nuance. I'll never have a full understanding of it, but a better understanding of the nuance that goes into making such a huge decision and then everything that comes along after it. So I so appreciate you sharing that with this audience. It's so valuable. And thank you for everything that you do online. It's such a light in the world.
Thank you, April. I've been looking forward to this too long. It's so great to chat with you.
It's a simple fact that nearly everyone in the world could benefit from building psychological strength. But not everyone will put in the time and effort to do so. But today you did. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Building Psychological Strength. Now, if you're interested in building the mental toughness, confidence, and resilience you need to thrive through life's ups and downs, visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com. Also, if there's someone in your life who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And if you yourself found this episode valuable, meaning if you took away even one insight that you can use to build psychological strength in your own life, we would so appreciate it if you would drop us a rating and a review on iTunes. The thing is, the more ratings and reviews we have, the easier it is to get this powerful and important content out to the people who need to hear it. Remember, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So choose wisely, my friend. And I'll see you next time on Building Psychological Strength.